Hey guys, welcome to DreamCoin, where we show how to invest for a better tomorrow. My name's Tyler, and today we are going over the crazy MRIN short interest data that came out today that we were expecting. I was putting on to everybody that this data would be releasing after hours from the market today, and it ended up coming out and looks very bullish for the stock if it can get the proper attention on it going into the next week. To get started on everything right now, this is going to be the chart set up since June 29th. And as of today, we are still sitting above a good portion of the initial start of this action that went into the end of June. The short interest data that came out was actually from June 30th with the downtrend. And this actually looks similar to today, almost like scarily identical, where we had literally in pre-market June 30th, this trend where it spiked up here and went down to where it did the almost exact same motion over here going into today. And I think a significant portion of this, whether people want to believe this or not, the downtrends were just too heavy for where the volume was today. We were on SSR because it was down 10%, but we only had about like 6 million volume for the day. And we were expecting this to kind of just happen because going into this data, I assume a lot of the shorts knew they were kind of screwed when this comes out. It seems very obvious to me still that there's somebody trying to keep this price above key levels, because there was a huge fight at the end of close to keep this above $14. And since we had looked back at the stock over the last few market days, I did say that the price levels of 16 and 14 were going to be key. It finally broke that 16 level today, dipped under 14 for just a small amount of time, and then bounced back up onto it right before close, where it settled down for a little bit. The short interest news that we were so highly anticipating going into after hours today did actually come out pretty quickly after market close, and it showed MRIN's short interest was actually a volume of almost 4.5 million shares short as of June 30th. If we put that into a percent from the last time they had their short interest updated on the 15th, that is a 2,700% increase in the short interest, which I don't see any other stock in this period of time that has increased that much out of this. This is just wild. There might be some other ones right now that are comparable in numbers that I'm just not aware of, but that is just an obscene turnover of how many more shares were shorted since June 30th, especially with so many people using this false data from the 15th where the short interest was only 1% and they said this didn't have short squeeze potential and all of those other variables involved. If we compare this to other tickers like BLIN, for example, where people have been comparing these a lot, BLIN only has about 7.72% of the float shorted as of June 30th, and XELA is only estimated to have about 15% of the float shorted as of June 30th. I know some people will probably bring up the Fintel numbers that are coming out right now with XELA, but they're just using a really small public float, which I don't think is accurate, which would put that over 60%, and XELA is just not at that point. I don't think they're factoring in the share offering that happened either, so that amount should possibly update when they actually get their data backfilled. But as we look at the short interest list on MarketWatch for most shorted stocks, MRIN is currently sitting top 4 based on the amount of float that is shorted. Their estimate for MarketWatch is almost 48% of the public float, and this is just a huge change from where they were before. Almost everybody said this had run. There was no way that this was more shorted or anything, and this was even going into that Wednesday, June 30th, where this was shorted so much farther down and everybody thought it was dead because it had already run a ton in the last week before then. This could put MRIN up higher in a lot of people's watch lists because it was so belittled for only having 1% short interest. I saw a couple more notable traders that were trying to post out on social media as well, and it just looks like it could be renewing some of that volume back into the stock that we've been lacking over the last few market days. If we look at the Fintel short squeeze list, they actually haven't updated the stuff with the new info today, so I'm hoping this will come out early morning. But a lot of people pay attention more so to Fintel, and so this would be more of the catalyst side of this information that would come out, as this and other platforms and algo screeners and different things of that nature, kind of alert people to what is going on with the short interest on this. If we check on Ortex, they have 105% of the free flow shorted, which is obviously, I'm just going to take this with a grain of salt now, considering they tried to claim this was 150% on Wednesday at one point, and it turns out that we're only at 47% on Market Watch or 42% on NASDAQ, depending on whatever float you want to use. But if we look at the cost to borrow minimum, they do have a pretty expensive cost to borrow still. Average is 300%. Most places are looking between 140 and 200% for cost to borrow as a minimum. And so if we try to take those accurately, those could be getting very expensive for short still. And we do have those options expiring on Friday that we previously talked about. As we look at the chart here on MRIN, I'm going to be giving you a couple scenarios of where this could be playing out. So the first being, I do think there's still large money that is looking on the bull side of this. I think today could have possibly been a bear trap if you're more bullish on the scenario. They kind of just let the shorts have their way with it, let it kind of drift down and everything going into after hours, waiting for the impending news to come out. And what I could be seeing in an extreme bull case is starting in pre-market, if we get some decent volume going, this could see a large run tomorrow or at least a few good spikes. Obviously, even going into this information, it seems like the hype has died off on MRIN for people that were originally into it since its largest peak. If we want to look at a more speculative scenario, not only are shorts capable of manipulating stocks and their prices and everything, bulls are capable of doing this too if they have the right buying power. And so if we look towards a possible institution or fund or just very large investor that wants this popped up, which it has seemed like they have done in the past off certain support levels when it's gotten too close for comfort on breaking key supports, we could be seeing a situation where they kind of just pump the stock a little bit up into certain price ranges that would renew a bit more interest in the stock, that would cause retail to pay more attention to it, especially with the current short interest being updated. I think this would bring back a lot of volume in the stock, and that would be a lot more bullish of a scenario going in. Obviously, we can't know how somebody's going to react with this stuff, but that is something they could do to try to further push shorts underwater and renew interest and everything going on with this. Another scenario that I'm looking at that could just be a middle ground more so is that this further consolidates and interest kind of basically slowly builds. It could have a further push down where some shorts could cover, but this would be more of that consolidation and possible slow rise to attention going into Friday, and then whatever happens with options contracts and puts and all that stuff would play out how it would for a possible squeeze then. And then a bear case for me would be, we're looking down to where if this breaks $14 significantly and keeps going down, there is a possible support here down by $12 where it had gapped up going from June 30th to July 1st. So that's something significant to keep in mind. Although it did keep this 14 today, if the volumes is not there, and volume has been key throughout the entire movement of the stock thus far, we are looking at a possible downside to 12. Shorts still do have to cover at some point, and it's still expensive for them not to cover. So whenever that does happen, that's still going to boost the price a little bit, I would imagine, especially with it being estimated close to 50% of the public float. If we don't get the price moved up from here, it's not going to do much except for sit here, and then obviously the price wouldn't necessarily be covered enough to go over 20. If we get to a scenario where shorts feel like everything's being more aggressive towards where the price could be rising and getting volatile again, I think that's going to scare them a little bit and get them more likely to cover and cut their losses. So that's what push we're going to be needing to look for in the stock if we want to see this go up. If this does get pushed up again and we can get and sit above that $17 to $20 area, we would be seeing a situation where if shorts are forced to cover, I could still be seeing $30 to $40 on a squeeze, especially if this carries out through Friday with those contracts coming in. The other thing to keep in mind is to look at the volume of call contracts that came in last week versus puts that were put on this, because it was a significant ratio between the two. And then we could also be looking towards where there might be some calls that are bought in from bigger money as well, and that would be why the volume of options would be important to pay attention to on the other hand of that. So I'm going to be looking for a possible downside to about $12 as of now, and then if we get some volume and get some possible spikes in from bigger money, I think this is going to be where we see the reset of this cycle to where it could possibly extend this squeeze out. Right now, it's still going to be volatile. There's no telling where this is going to go, but based on technicals, these are the two levels I'm seeing where we need to either hold 14 and try to retest 16 and 17 to get new supports, or we need to look for possible downside if it breaks under 212. And then kind of just reevaluate the situation at that point, because it might just be over if the volume doesn't come in and it goes that low. I'm looking forward to how MRIN is going to react based on this news going into the next day or so. I think tomorrow is going to be very important for where this goes. So if tomorrow, July 13th, we don't see a lot of action, or we see a lot of action, it's going to be very decisive in where the future of this goes, I think. Other than that, that's going to do it for me in this video today, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.